Wayne Gretzky has gone down in history as the greatest player to ever take to the ice in the National Hockey League. But one day in 1988 would change his career and the history of the league forever. Welcome back to another episode of Alternate Hockey History, the series where we revisit key moments throughout hockey history to see how an alternate outcome might have changed the history of the sport. In today's episode, we are going to be taking a look at the Great One's prestigious NHL career and asking the question, what if Wayne Gretzky stayed with the Edmonton Oilers? To remind you of what actually took place, allow me to take you back to August 9th, 1988. Gretzky, the undisputed star of the National Hockey League at the time, wished to stick close to his wife Janet Jones as she worked as an actress in Hollywood, and he also wanted to improve the exposure of hockey in the United States. So, it was announced that Gretzky would be traded, along with Mike Krzyzewski and Marty McSorley, to the Los Angeles Kings, in exchange for Jimmy Carson, Martin Gelinas, first-round picks in the 1989, 1991 and 1993 entry drafts, and $15 million. The trade left Oilers fans stunned and sent shockwaves across the entire NHL, highlighting that if the best player in the world can be traded, anyone can be traded. Gretzky went on to play 8 seasons with the Los Angeles Kings and continued to play the high standard of hockey that was expected from the Great One, as he scored 246 goals and 672 assists for 918 points in 613 regular season games, as well as winning 2 scoring titles and the Hart Trophy for the 9th and final time in his career. In doing so, Gretzky became the poster boy for hockey in the US, rapidly building the Kings fan base across California and helping to spark interest in hockey throughout the United States. As a result, 24 of the league's 31 teams currently play in America, with a 25th on the way in the coming seasons. But what if Gretzky wasn't traded? What if he remained with the Edmonton Oilers? How would things have been different? If Gretzky had stayed in Edmonton, the Oilers dynasty of the mid to late 1980s likely would have continued for many more years than it did in reality. In the 9 seasons Wayne Gretzky played for Edmonton in the National Hockey League, the Oilers won 4 Stanley Cups, had 1 finals loss, 0 conference finals exits, 2 second-round exits, 2 first-round exits, and 0 seasons where they missed the playoffs. However, Edmonton's playoff record post-Gretzky still had success, but it was nothing compared to when they had number 99 on the roster. In the 8 seasons Gretzky was playing in LA, the Oilers won 1 Stanley Cup, had 0 finals losses, 2 conference finals exits, 0 second-round exits, 1 first-round exit, and 4 seasons where they didn't make the playoffs. If Gretzky never left Edmonton, just imagine how dominant the Oilers would have continued to be. The Oilers would likely have made the playoffs in most, if not every season he remained there, and could have been a legitimate Stanley Cup contender every single season. I mean, the team even won a Stanley Cup championship after he was traded, something that Gretzky couldn't achieve in his career after he left Edmonton. If the Oilers were still a championship caliber team and legitimate contender for at least a few years after the best player in the world left, if Gretzky had played his entire 20-year career with Edmonton, for example, and provided they keep some of their other key players around, I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility that Edmonton wins 8, 9, or maybe even 10 Stanley Cup championships during this time frame, given how dominant Wayne Gretzky remained in the years after he left the Oilers, and how strong a group the franchise had behind him when Gretzky left. They won a championship without him, so they were a solid team without Wayne Gretzky, but if you stick him back in the mix, they would have been completely dominating the NHL for many years. Also, if Gretzky remained with the Oilers, several of the team's other star players might have decided to stick around too. Guys like Mark Messier, Jari Kurri, Paul Coffey and Grant Furr all left the Oilers franchise during Gretzky's time in LA, as the team went from Stanley Cup champions to missing the playoffs. So if Gretzky wasn't traded, some or all of these future Hall of Fame players might have stayed in Edmonton for many more seasons than they did in reality, as they knew that they were playing with the best player in the world for the franchise that had the best possible chance to win the Stanley Cup each season. Let's not forget that all of this took place before the salary cap was introduced, so as long as the Oilers had enough money in the vault to pay them, which they probably did, every single one of these future Hall of Fame players could have stayed with Edmonton for as long as they wanted and continued to bring home the silverware each season. In addition, if Gretzky remains with the Oilers, it's possible that perhaps he scores even more points and finishes his career with even higher point totals than he did in reality, further cementing himself as the greatest player to ever take to the ice. There is no doubt that the Great One played with better teammates in Edmonton than those he played with in LA, and staying with those players for a longer period of time could have seen him notch several more 200 plus point seasons with better line mates and higher overall quality players around him. Sure, he did play with some pretty good players in LA like Luc Robitaille, Dave Taylor and Rob Blake, but compare those players to the likes of Mark Messier, Jari Kurri, Glenn Anderson, Paul Coffey, and even Esa Tikkanen, and there's just no competition there. Perhaps remaining in Edmonton and spending many more years with those players means that Gretzky breaks 3,000 or even reaches 3,500 points as he spends more of his career with some of the most talented players he ever played with. And finally, Gretzky not being traded and staying with the team long term might also have meant that he spent the rest of his career as an Oiler and retired in Edmonton. If he isn't traded as he approaches the prime years of his career and instead decides to plant his roots firmly in Edmonton, perhaps he never finds the desire to move to another team in free agency like he did in reality. Gretzky ended up playing for 4 NHL franchises over his 20-year career and signed as a free agent once. But if his life and everything that he held dear was in Edmonton, then why would he want or need to move? Could you imagine how incredible it would have been for Gretzky and for Edmonton Oilers fans if Wayne retired in 1999 in Edmonton with the Oilers logo on his jersey? Sure, his retirement with the New York Rangers was still pretty special, but him retiring as an Oiler is such a poetic thought, isn't it? The team he played for as he entered the league, as the team entered the league, and the fans that watched him grow and achieve the pinnacle of his hockey success, all getting the chance to applaud the best player that ever played as he skated around an NHL rink for the final time in person, that would have been beautiful to witness, I'm sure. However, on the flip side of this alternate reality, if LA doesn't acquire Gretzky, they likely wouldn't have had nearly as much success as they did when he played for the Kings. In the 8 seasons Gretzky played for the team, the Kings won 0 Stanley Cups, had 1 finals loss, 0 conference finals losses, 3 second round exits, 1 first round exit, and 3 seasons where they didn't make the playoffs. Sure, that's nothing really that special, but if you compare that to when Gretzky was playing in Edmonton and the Kings won 0 Stanley Cups, had 0 finals losses, 0 conference finals losses, 1 second round exit, 5 first round exits, and 3 seasons where they didn't make the playoffs, you can see that whilst they didn't go all the way and clinch a cup while Gretzky was on the roster, the LA Kings became a much better team and a legitimate playoff contender when he was around, certainly in his first few years in California. Also, if Gretzky never plays for the Kings, perhaps hockey doesn't become as successful in America as it has in reality. There's no doubt that Gretzky moving to LA and living in the Californian sun did wonders to improve the exposure of the league across America and helped pave the way for 2 more franchises in California as well as many other teams across the country. If Gretzky didn't move to the US, the movement towards creating more Sunbelt franchises, whilst likely still would have happened, either wouldn't have been nearly as successful as they have eventually become, or they would have taken much longer to get off the ground due to a lack of famous face or poster boy advertising the type of talent a team like this can be home to. Perhaps by Gretzky remaining in Canada, hockey doesn't get the increased exposure across the United States away from the original 6 franchises already in the country. It continues to be seen as more of a Canadian sport in the long term, and the NHL doesn't expand as much or add as many teams into the country as it actually does. So, in conclusion, if Gretzky had remained with the Edmonton Oilers, the team likely would have cemented themselves as the greatest dynasty in the history of the NHL, whilst the Los Angeles Kings would have continued to wallow in their previous mediocrity. the Great One would have continued to dominate the league with a core of future Hall of Famers behind him and could have reached even greater heights. But the sport might not have grown to the extent it has in the US. Whether being traded was the right or the wrong thing to do for Gretzky's career, one thing's for sure. With 2,857 points in 1,487 games, there likely won't be another player as talented or as successful to take to the ice in the National Hockey League as Wayne Gretzky. And there you go! What do you think would have happened if Gretzky had stayed with the Edmonton Oilers? Also, is there another alternate hockey history you would like me to explore? Let me know in the comments below, I'd love to hear what you guys think. But thank you very much for watching, guys, I hope you have enjoyed. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, or watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye! A big thank you to Chris Gadsby and Max Artis for helping support this video via Patreon. If you too want to help support the channel a little bit further and get a shout out at the end of any future videos, make sure you head over to patreon.com/oddmanrush and become a patron today.